Un šodien Cecilija Tham uz Magnetika Latvijas skatuves ar savu lekciju Tehnoloģijas cilvēces attīstībai.
Jeb angliski Technology for Exponential Humanity. Dārgie draugi, dārgie festivāla apmeklētāji, nāciet tuvāk un klausāmies Cecilijā.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me well? So I'm from Barcelona, and I really didn't expect this cold, so I might be doing a little jumping jacks in the midway just to warm myself up. But let's get started. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about my trajectory and what brought me here. This is me and my family, my two older brothers. I'm from Macau. I don't know if you guys heard of Macau, which is a very, very small town. And I am the youngest of the three. Moved around a lot, was in Macau, then moved to the US, studied, went to South America backpacking, and landed in Barcelona. And I wanted to study biology. I had in mind to become a neurosurgeon, right? So like a good Chinese daughter, I told my mom that I wanted to be a doctor, and she was very, very happy. Except that midway, I decided that I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. I told my mom that, and I said, you know what, I want to change my mind, and I wanted to study architecture. And she said to me, well, sure, you can study architecture, you can study design, as long as you get into Harvard. And so I tried my best, and somehow I landed at Harvard studying architecture. And I was pretty happy studying architecture at Harvard, and except that when I finished my degree, I had this kind of epiphany and said, you know what, I'm going to go backpack in South America, and that's exactly what I did. So I backpacked for about 6 months in South America, walking around, trying to kind of find myself, and somehow landed in Barcelona, where I met my ex-husband, and I will tell you a little bit more about that. Well, once I landed in Barcelona, I found myself like this. I didn't speak the language, I didn't know anybody, and I found myself kind of useless. I couldn't find a job, and no one would hire me as an architect. And I was very, very frustrated, and somehow this happened. Actually, my kids are here. I don't know if they're listening to me, but what happened was that as much as I love my kids, I didn't really expect myself to be a stay-at-home mom. This wasn't my calling. And I was really frustrated with what was my life. And I'm sure a lot of you guys feel the same way. Then this happened. My ex-husband bought me a sewing machine. He bought me a sewing machine. This was a couple years ago, he bought me a sewing machine. I didn't know what to do with the sewing machine. How many of you guys have sewn here, have used a sewing machine before? Quite a few, actually. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. The first time I used a sewing machine, you know when you put two pieces of cloth together and the machine goes taka, 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 taka. And it's spaced out perfectly, and it put two pieces of cloth together. And I said, holy cow, I made that. I made these two pieces of cloth together. You know how when a child runs to the mom and dad and said, Mommy, Daddy, I've made this. And they have this pride in their eyes, and they have this sparkle in their eyes? That's how I felt, and I felt joy, and I felt pride. And I realized that every single time I increase a little bit of my self-confidence. And I said, wow, this is actually a good thing. So I started compulsively making other things, right? Found myself making shoes for my little girls, which they never worn any of the things that I made. I made it for myself. I made it because I really enjoy this increase of self-confidence. Then one day, this wonderful ex-husband of mine came home and said, I need a website for my company. And I said, I'll do it. And he looked at me like, well, what do you know about programming? And I said, well, I don't, but I can learn. So I Googled HTML, CSS, everything I needed to know about programming, copy, paste, and I made my first website. And I said, wow, not bad, not bad. I'm a programmer, not bad at all. The third example I wanted to show you is that another friend of mine came up to me and said, I need a shutter release. You know this little thing, this little clicker that you push to take a picture from far away? And I said, well, let's make it. And he looked at me like, you're kind of crazy. Why don't you just buy this? It's like 15 bucks. And I said, no, this is a challenge. So we went to an electronics store, spent $5, and bought the materials. We hacked the camera, and I made my first shutter release. And I said, holy cow, this is actually pretty cool. I can make stuff. Then I realized, you know, what if we put all these people together and we create a space and we make stuff together? And this is where we got the idea of creating this space called the Makers of Barcelona. I'm going to show you a video. Is the audio on? Yes.
Mob was started about 4 years ago, and from the very beginning we knew that we didn't want to just start another co-working or shared office. So we started working on the idea, and we wanted to convert Mob into what it is today, which is the co-working that is well known for being very innovative and technological. The space is actually very quiet, but it really helps with disruptive ideas. It is very multidisciplinary. We have a lot of different people and very diverse, very technological, in fact, very, very technological. But above all, it's a space that is very multifunctional, so we use it and adapt it for different events and activities. For Mob, communication is really important. This is why we have implemented a communication system for our members. We really believed in young talents, so we started a program to help young startups to jumpstart their entrepreneur projects. At Mob, we do a lot of different activities. So we have networking, we do lots of brainstormings, we have team building, we do a lot of training sessions, we have 3D printers, and we really try to bring all these together into this one space. At Mob, we don't work, we make.
So this is our community at Mob, Makers of Barcelona. Currently, we are about 300 members, and from all different industries and fields. So a maker, I don't know if you guys heard of the term maker. A maker for us is someone with a mentality of being self-sufficient, passionately driven, fully capable, and highly motivated. Someone that can make things happen on their own. This is how we understood what a maker is. And for us, a maker is more of an attitude than it is an activity. So because we are makers, we continue producing new things. So a couple years ago, I went to Tokyo to visit some friends of mine. And Tokyo happened to have the first Fab Cafe. And I went to visit this Fab Cafe, and I saw these 8-year-old having a birthday party. And what I saw was that there were a bunch of these 8-year-olds with their iPads, drawing on the iPads. And I said to myself, well, why are they on their iPads? They're having a birthday party. They should be, playing around with each other. Well, it turns out that they were using the iPad to draw. With the drawings, they would engrave with a laser cutter onto cookies so that each child would have their own customized cookies. And I was like, wow, this is mind-blowing. I need to bring this to Barcelona, which is exactly what I did. So Fab Cafe is a place where, it's a coffee shop where you have digital fabrication tools like 3D printers, laser cutters, sensors, and whatnot. We bring this together because we wanted to bring these technologies closer to the public. Let me show you. So here you can see some cookies being laser engraved. We also did other fun projects. We have done gummy people, where we would 3D scan people and make gummy people version of it, or chocolate versions of it, where we would use it for Valentine's Day, except that we realized that it's more appropriate for Halloween, because it's kind of scary. This is me in chocolate. It looks good. It did not taste good. I'm not very good at making chocolate myself. But the idea is use these technologies to, for different activities and whatnot. Now, we also created a platform. This is a collaborative innovation platform that we created. So we're really a big fan of what we call hybrid design. Hybrid design is this notion of, let's say, for example, your cell phone, right? The cell phone in and of itself is a hardware, and the software behind it is the App Store. We use the same approach. While we have the community and the space itself as our hardware, we needed the software to be able to scale and to connect to other communities worldwide. And the last project I wanted to share with you is future funded. I don't know if you guys know Spain very well, but we have a very tough unemployment rate among youth, which is around 52%. 1 out of 2 in Spain, 20 to 30 years old, are unemployed. So we created this platform to help youth find funding for their education resources. Now, we considered ourselves a collective of innovation activists. And our ethos is to build communities to innovate together. Above all, we believe that everyone can create, and that disruptive ideas come from empowered individuals. Now, the question is, well, why should we care about making, right? So I'm going to throw out some questions. Like, for example, the shirt that you guys are wearing, do you guys have any idea where that is made? Anybody? kind of sort of from the region. We don't really know where it is made, how it is made, who made it. Let's go back in time. Let's say 200, 300 years ago. Who made stuff? The artisans, right? And what did they make? They make carpentries, they make the metalsmith would make metal work, shoemakers will make shoes, right? What about during the industrial period? What did they make? Well, factories will make stuff, right? And they have this high capacity to mass produce things so that they can lower the cost. Now, come to our time, who makes stuff? Globalization happened, right? And so we send things to developing countries because the labor cost is much cheaper. I'm going to compare a couple other things. During the artisans period, what did people buy? What was the consumer patterns? In the artisan period, people buy the essentials. They have one pair of shoes, and if that pair of shoes is broken, what do? They repair it, right? During the industrial period, costs started to drop because mass production happened. What do we buy now? We buy anything. We would go to, let's say, a big, mall or commercial center. We see this shirt that is $5. We would buy it. We bring it home. We wear it a couple of times. We might throw it away, and then we buy it all over again. I'm going to compare one more comparison that is on education. During the artisans period, what was school like? There was no schooling. There was very limited schooling, which means that if your dad's supposed to be a carpenter, it's very likely that you will also learn carpentry skills, right? During the industrial period is when mass education happened. The same way we had mass production, we translate that idea with mass education, where we had one form of education for all. Education system nowadays actually hasn't changed not one little bit. We have used the same system during the industrial period of educating our children as it is today. Why is this important at all? I'm sure you guys have heard of the do-it-yourself revolution, right? And I'm even sure that you guys have seen this poster of, on the right-hand side, on the right, on the left, I can't remember, on the right-hand side. The Rosita Riveteer poster. This was supposed to empower women to go into the factories to work during the war period. Now, on the left-hand side, you will see a cover from Wired magazine from a few years ago. Now, obviously, the magazine cover is inspired by Rosita Riveteer. Now, notice that there's a couple of differences. First, you will see the lady with a tool in her hand, and that tool is connected. And this, in turn, is kind of what is representative of today, meaning that we nowadays are empowered by the technologies, and this technologies is actually connected to the world. And for me, this is a major paradigm shift. Not only that, if you notice the little tiny stamp on the bottom, which it says, if you can think it, you can make it. And this is very, very true. And I can tell you that for sure because I have lived it, and I can vouch for it that this is true nowadays. So we know that information is ubiquitous, right? So the other day I went online and I searched how to build a fusion reactor. And so you're supposed to be able to build a fusion reactor with the tools that you have in your own kitchen, and you can build it right in your own home. I don't even know what a fusion reactor is, but just in case you want to build a fusion reactor, you can. And not only that, technology is low cost. You can buy, for example, on the top left is a DNA sequencer for $500 that you can sequence your own DNA. The second one is a 3D printer, which costs about $1,000. And the last one is an Arduino that you can build your own computing devices. I love this example, the time from concept to consumer. So on the right-hand side upper screen, you will see this gentleman with a onesies. Well, his name is Joe Justice. Joe Justice is a programmer, and he's actually a friend of mine from Seattle. One day he decided that he wants to build the most efficient car in the market. But he didn't just build it in any sort of way. What he did was that he created this page called Wikispeed, and he started to invite all of his friends to contribute how to build the most efficient car. And not only that, he opened up his garage and said, well, anyone who's interested can come into the garage and help me build this car. Well, he managed to build his first prototype in 3 months, which is the upper right-hand side one. The second prototype, the black one, took him 12 months, and the third prototype took him 16 months. So he built 3 prototypes over the period of 3 years. Well, the last prototype actually is the fastest, the most efficient, and the lowest emission rate there is in the market today, and it just recently won the X Prize. So none of the car manufacturers like Toyota or even Nissan have that capacity and flexibility to be able to innovate at that rate. From mass production to mass customization. This is another example from a friend of mine. They're a pair, Jorge and Esther. So Jorge is a programmer, and Esther is a designer. And what they did with it, he would create the algorithm to be able to manage to customize the pattern that she designed so that every single piece of clothing comes out of the algorithm will be perfectly customizable for each individual as they 3D body scan the person. Access to funding made easy. So I'm sure you guys have heard of Kickstarter. This particular example is from Bianca. Bianca is another friend of mine. She made this absolutely beautiful 3D blanket that has this pyramidal shape. And the pyramids are actually algorithmic based, meaning that you can change the shape accordingly. Well, she needed about $40,000 to get started with her company. She turned out in 10 days raised about $200,000, and she was able to start her company. And this was the largest funded project coming out of Spain 3 years ago, and she was part of our members at Makers of Barcelona. I'm very proud of her. And then also the power of communication. I don't know if you guys have seen this video from Momondo, which is a talk about DNA and how we all have different components of our ancestries. And it's probably one of the most well-known campaign using social media recently. Now, we are all facing a very major paradigm shift these days. I'm going to talk about a few of them. So if you imagine this diagram, imagine this back in 200-300 years ago. We have no access to knowledge. We have very limited funding. Technology is inaccessible, and there's no form of communication, right? Move to, let's say, in the 90s, where the only form of education is through college. Funding is through banks. Technologies is with big institutions and research centers. And communication is through big newspapers and so on and so forth. But this is what's happening today. Right? Knowledge, we know that we can access through the internet. Funding is, through platforms like Kickstarters, you can arrive to funding. Technologies is low cost, and communication is do it yourself. Which means that, and this is a big statement, for the first time, actually in human history, us as individuals, as each of us, have the same creation power, innovation power as big institutions, as the state, as the government, as big corporates. And this is a major shift in terms of our capacity to create. So not too far from the future, what will happen, what we'll see is that instead of being passive learners, we will see active learners. What was that? Learn by doing, exactly. Where you will see students developing their own developmental coursework. Instead of seeing passive consumers, you will see active makers, right? On the left, you will see this boy called Quinn. I met Quinn 3 years ago in a maker fair, and he loves to make robots. Not only does he like to make robots, he used these Arduino plaques that I was showing you earlier. He would build kits so that he could sell these kits to other children to be able to make robots. But he didn't stop there neither. He would build a platform so that he could sell these kits worldwide to other children so that they can build their own robots, right? What's really amazing is that Quinn, at 13 years old, is a professor at MIT teaching Arduinos to adults. I'm not saying that we all should be Quinn, but it's actually a pretty amazing feat. So we will see that there's a shift of how we manufactured. So before, we would design locally and make locally, like in the artisans period, right? Then we see globalization happened. We will design locally. We will ship it to places like China or Indonesia to have it manufactured. Well, right now, there's a major change where we can design globally but manufacture locally. And this, in turn, will change things drastically in the sense that no longer do we have to not know the conditions of where our things are being produced. If not, we can use local resources, local communities, and foster local creativity and innovation so that we can promote manufacturing locally. In this example, what I'm trying to show is that before, we have three different roles, right? We have the white-collar people, the guys that are designing or thinking or working behind the computers. Then you have the guy, the manufacturing guy, or the guy in the blue collar who makes stuff. And then you have the guy that is a consumer. So before, these three are very different roles and different people, whereas nowadays we have this new role. The same guy who has the capacity to think and design has also the capacity to create or prototype or create and make stuff, and then in turn making for himself, has a very high capacity to innovate because the innovation loop is close among himself, which means that we will start seeing projects like this where, this is the example of a bionic hand where this child was born with a deformity. His dad couldn't afford to buy prostheses every single year. So what he did was he bought a 3D printer and he created an open source file for a bionic hand so that he could print for $300 prostheses for his child every single year, and he allowed other children to be able to, or other parents to be able to create these files, these bionic hands for their kids. We will also start seeing numerous number of innovations. For example, I'm going to show you 4 examples here. The top one is RoboCoach. I don't condone this, but I love this project in the sense that you can strap on electronics on a cockroach so that you can start manipulating, like as if it's a remote control car, driving it left to the right. On the left-hand side, you see a hologram. It's a project called Hologram for Freedom. So in Spain, a couple years ago, the government decided that it is illegal to do protests in public. So this company, this agency, what they did is that they projected a hologram of a protest right in front of the city hall, where it's completely legal because no one is there. They can't actually arrest anyone for this activity. So it actually got onto CNN and a couple of other news media. On the lower right, you see this beautiful, beautiful artist project. It's a 3D printed shawl, for example, where the movement of the shawl followed the eyes of the person who was seeing them. So if you look directly to them, the feathers would close out, but if you look away, the feather will open up. So it's a kind of a provocative way for the artist to question materials and electronics. The last project, which I absolutely love, is the 3D food printers. And the way it works is that it would print a shell, and within the shell is all the seeds and the mushrooms within it. So you would print the whole entire thing, you would leave it for a week, and the sprouts will come out, and the mushrooms will come out, and you put the whole thing in the oven, and you will eat it by the end of the week, which in my perspective is a very innovative project. This is Amy Mullen. She inspired me a lot. She did a TED Talk a couple years ago that I watched. And the reason why I wanted to show you is because during her TED Talk, she said something that really stuck to my mind. And what she said was that when she goes to run, I forgot to mention that Amy Mullen was born without legs, and she uses these prosthetics. When she goes running, she would put on these shoes or these legs that will allow her to jump further and run much faster. But when she goes out at night, what she will do is she will put on these legs that will allow her to be taller and thinner and prettier, right? And what she said in her TED Talk was that she can change these legs according to her activities. And she said that to her friends. And then her friends looked at her and said, wait a minute, but that's like so not fair. Right? And I find that really interesting because I realized that not only do we have the technologies nowadays to solve our problems, we actually have the technologies to go beyond our problems, go much further beyond. And this is what technology allows us to do today. So we somehow created this capacity to create superhumans with our technologies. And so I have the privilege this past summer to spend 9 weeks at a place called Singularity University. So if you haven't heard of Singularity University, I would like to spend about 2 minutes to explain to you because the concept is really revolutionary for me. So we're 90 cohorts. We spent 9 weeks together. And we are a global community using exponential technologies to tackle the world's biggest challenges and build an abundant future for all. What does that mean? So for us, exponential technologies are all about artificial intelligence, robotics, synthetic biology, 3D printing, basically the technologies that we have at hand today. And not only that, we're going to try to tackle some of the largest global challenges. And this year, what we did was we tackled climate change. And I want to share with you, out of those 90 cohorts, 18 startups using exponential technologies for these challenges had come out. And I want to share with you 3 of those projects. The first one is a soil microbiome test kit, which allows farmers and allows anyone that have access to soil to be able to test their soil. Not only that, they're using artificial intelligence to be able to create soil fertility so that they could use it for food production, protect food production, and as well as even to the extent of cooling the planet. The second one, which I absolutely love, is called Blue CO2. What they did was they created a bioreactor, a food bioreactor that turns air, basically air, into food. I don't know the science behind it, but it sounds pretty amazing. And the third one is a biotechnology platform that engineers viruses for good. And what they are aiming to do with the first product is to tackle and change the viruses so that they can be antibiotic resistant to human. Actually, to tackle so that they're no longer antibiotic resistant to human. So, in my opinion, I think that we have all superhuman powers. We just don't know it. And to discover it, I'm going to give you 5 little baby steps that we can take. The first one is to erase that line. We all somehow create this line, this invisible line, these boundaries that we think that we can't cross. Well, technology is actually helping us to cross this line. The second is to surround yourself with people that can support you. We're all going to fail, and we will all fall at some moment in our trajectory through this innovation and creative pathways. But if you surround yourself with people that can help you, you can go much further and you can go much further, yeah. The third one is start making, no matter how ugly or how imperfect or how, what's the word I'm looking for? How imperfect it is. You need to start making, because every single time you make, you increase a little bit of your self-confidence. And along the way, you'll be able to walk your path to innovation. The fourth one is to make prototypes and not assumptions. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to be doing a prototype workshop right here in 23XX Pavilion there, so I would invite all of you to join us. The reason I say that is because if you make assumptions, there's no way of whether or not you will know whether those assumptions are validated or not. But if you build prototypes, you can test those prototypes in real time. And the last one is said by Joy Ito. Joy Ito is a director of MIT Media Lab, and he just launched this amazing competition called the Award for Creative Disobedient. Now, I'm a huge advocate for being a creative disobedient in the sense that if we all stay within the boundaries, innovation is really difficult to happen. So try to step outside your comfort zone, step outside of that box, and explore. So with that, I myself started with a sewing machine. I'd like to know what you guys will be making today so that you can be on your path to be more innovative, more creative. And I invited you all to start making today. And with that, I end with my presentation. Thank you.